Our New Testament reading for this morning comes, as I have already mentioned, from Paul's letter to the church at Corinth. It's a relatively familiar passage for many of us, but it suffers some in translation. Paul is speaking of love, but he writes in a language that has quite a few words which we must translate all of them as love. And so we're like to confuse what Paul is actually saying. The word here is agape love, a sort of love that was not typically used to speak of love in Greek thought. It came into vogue really only in the Christian church, who used it to speak of the sort of love they had seen in the life of Jesus. As such, it was so distinct from other forms of love, brotherly and sisterly love, romantic love, that the first translators into English, such as the old King James, translated this passage we will hear not with the word love, but with the word charity. So let us listen now for what the Spirit would say to us through these words. Paul writes, "If I speak in the tongues of mortals and of angels, but do not have love, I am a noisy gong or a clanging cymbal. And if I have prophetic powers and understand all mysteries and all knowledge, and if I have all faith so as to remove mountains, but do not have love, I am nothing. If I give away all my possessions, and if I hand over my body so that I may boast, but do not have love, I gain nothing. Love is patient. Love is kind. Love is not envious or boastful or arrogant or rude. It does not insist on its own way. It is not irritable or resentful. It does not rejoice in wrongdoing, but rejoices in the truth. It bears all things, believes all things, hopes all things, endures all things. Love never ends. But as for prophecies, they will come to an end. As for tongues, they will cease. As for knowledge, it will come to an end. For we know only in part, and we prophesy only in part. But when the complete comes, the partial will come to an end. When I was a child, I spoke like a child. I thought like a child. I reasoned like a child. When I became an adult, I put an end to childish ways. For now we see in a mirror dimly, and mirrors in Paul's day were quite distorted. But then we shall see face to face. Now I know only in part, then I will know fully, even as I have been fully known. And now faith, hope, and love abide, these three. And the greatest of these is love." The word of the Lord.
Thanks be to God.
I grew up the oldest of 4 children, 3 brothers followed by a baby sister. And Ron was 13 months younger and 1 grade behind me in school. And that meant that we did an awful lot together. We rode the same school bus, we played on the same sports team, we shared the same bedroom. We had a lot of fun together, but we also did our share of fighting. And I don't know how it was with, or is, with other brothers who were only a year apart, but for the 2 of us, there was a great deal of competition, a lot of it pretty petty and trivial. Even though I was a year older and bigger and had an advantage in athletic pursuits, that didn't stop endless bickering over who was faster or who was the better baseball player or the better football player. And we could be pretty merciless in remembering mistakes the other had made. Any blunder on the playing field would lead to lots of razzing later on. We also kept track of the number of stitches we had had to sew up the cuts we had had over the years. And we viewed these as some sort of badge of courage. Toughness was important, and if one or the other of us cried when he got hurt, he was sure not to be allowed to forget it for quite some time. And when I was around 12, we moved out into the country. And there we were able to have horses. And of course, each of us thought his horse was a lot better than the other person's horse. But we also had a huge yard, which meant lots and lots and lots of grass that needed cutting. And here the issue was less who was better and more who was not carrying his share of the workload when it came to cutting all that grass. And oftentimes our disagreements would degenerate into punching and tussling on the floor, and they weren't ever anything serious. I don't think anyone ever really got hurt. But it aggravated my father that we didn't get along any better than we did. And I can remember him punishing us, fussing at us, lecturing us over this. Although for the life of me, I cannot recall any specific occasions or anything specific that he said after one of our fights. Although strangely enough, I do recall one time that he got so exasperated with our youngest brother that he called him a little imp, which Ron and I thought was the funniest thing we'd ever heard, especially after we went and looked up imp in the dictionary. Now, I don't remember specifics or quotes, but I still I have a pretty good image of my father trying to straighten us out after one of these fights. "What is wrong with you two?" I can imagine him saying. "Why can't you get along? You're brothers. You should be glad to have one another. You're supposed to take care of one another and love one another. You're family. Act like family." I don't know that these lectures ever did any real good. I think that we finally quit hitting each other just when we outgrew it. But we did occasionally act like family. We did occasionally stick up for one another. If another kid hit one of us with a rock, the other would jump to his defense. And I do remember once chasing a couple of older kids for blocks who had bloodied one of us with a big stick. And it seems to me that the situation in the Corinthian church nearly 2,000 years ago was not unlike the situation at my house some 40 years ago, with Paul as father and the Corinthians as the unruly children. In fact, in the letter, Paul does refer to himself as their father and to the Corinthians as infants in Christ, with their bickering and divisions and jealousies and quarreling. Like my brother and me, the Corinthians attempted to outdo one another, engaging in petty competitions over who was the most spiritual and who had the better spiritual gifts. It was their own religious version of "I'm better, I'm faster, I'm tougher, and you're a baby." And as soon as Paul has finished with the pleasantries he uses to open the letter, he immediately says, in so many words, "What is wrong with you people? Don't you know that you are all one in Christ? That you are supposed to care for and love one another? You're family. Act like family." Now, I suspect that many of you, if not all of us, have heard this passage read at some point. It's a very popular passage. At least it's very popular in certain venues. Where have you heard it?
Wedding.
Wedding, of course, at a wedding.